Hi, I'm Alan Stewart and this is the Great British Chef's Signature Series. I spent years of my career searching for somewhere where I could cook like this. I don't think you can beat something that you've freshly picked yourself that morning. We cook really vegetable-led food here. In fact, in the restaurant you can almost order meat as a side order. We've got a cheese maker who makes this incredible mozzarella. We've got a cider maker who makes incredible cider. Cooking's not hard with great ingredients. You really can make beautiful food. I'm cooking char-grilled Tromboncino squash with buffalo mozzarella, tomatoes and nasturtiums and a little fermented chilli. I'm incredibly lucky that all this produce has come fresh out of our surroundings, out the gardens here. So these are beautiful Tromboncino squashes that the gardeners here have grown in the Keeda houses. Lovely sweet flavour on the inside, a little bit like a courgette with a slightly harder texture. Incredible selection of tomatoes, some fermented chillies that we'll show you how to ferment. And we've got a few little nasturtium capers as they're starting to come through. Beautiful nasturtium flowers, leaves, capers, all these little bits and pieces. We try and use the whole vegetable and look at a plant as a whole ingredient rather than just one thing off it. So we're just going to trim off the little flower tops and then straight over onto the charcoal grill and let them sit there. Meanwhile, take a little shallot. We're just going to dice it real finely, put it in a little bit of olive oil, start to cook it very gently with a little cider vinegar. We've got cider house, very lucky again, made from our own freshly pressed apples. The joy is that everything here, as far as possible, we try to use things only from our environment. We really try and represent exactly what's going on outside our windows here. It allows you to be so creative as a chef in what you do. We started to create our own vinegars. We've taken beans the previous summer and we've dried them out, or we've picked lavender from the garden in the summer and we've dried that out. There are many things that you can do. We look at techniques throughout history that can help you to really preserve the seasons, to preserve those gluts and use them throughout the year so that you're never running short in what people describe as the hunger gap. Okay, so we use a lot of fermentation on the estate to preserve gluts. One thing we absolutely adore fermenting is chillies. Real simple process. Take your fresh chillies, we've got some lovely red ones here straight out of the greenhouses. Drop them into a preserving jar. We want them just to fit just below the lid. And what we tend to use is a salt brine of between 2 and 5% depending on the sweetness of the product. We'll take 1 litre of water, we'll make a little bit of extra brine. And for 1 litre, 2%, that'll be 20 grams. So we weigh into that, weigh out 20 grams of salt. Add that into our water. Just whisk it. So you want to dissolve all of that salt into your water. Pour it over your chillies. So with some products, you just want to weigh them down and that will push the product down and make sure that it's inside the salt brine. Seal our lid over. And then you just sit that to one side for 2 weeks. What I would recommend is that when the fermentation process starts, it starts to create air, gas, and things like that. So every day, every morning, for the first couple of days when you're fermenting, just pop the jar lid a little bit. That'll stop the jar bubbling over, and then you can seal it again. Obviously, for the recipe today, I've got some already done that we preserved from last year, and we've taken them out and started using them again this year. And then to that we're going to add a real nice selection of these beautiful cherry tomatoes. I was out early this morning picking them myself. I love to take a few little green ones, a little bit of acidity, a little bit of tang, a little bit of freshness. To these chilies we're just going to add these cherry tomatoes. I'm not really one of those chefs who wants everything perfect and square, and I just a little rough chop on the tomato. I think nature's flavour really sings through. I want to use as much as possible. I don't want to waste anything. As I said before, a little bit of green adds that real savoury, sour zing to the dish. Once we've done that, we're going to take our little shallot, been gently cooking away in the olive oil and cider vinegar, and we're going to add in our tomatoes, fermented chilli into that. And we're going to drop that back onto the stove on a really low heat, just for a minute or two, so it starts to break down. A little touch of sea salt. Salt always helps to break things down, to draw that moisture out and that flavour. So we're just going to sit that there for a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, our squash, as we can see here, it's nicely starting to char on the outside. Cooking on charcoal and wood, for me, is the most natural way of cooking. It's a natural way of manipulating food. I think it's really important that you think about how you're treating the produce and how you can get the most interesting developed flavours out of that. So we've got a lovely char on these Tromboncinos. I just want to keep all that char flavour and sweetness of the squash. I don't want it to dry out in any way. So we're just going to drop them onto a little bit of oiled tinfoil. And we're going to use as seasoning a little bit of salt, And then we're just going to throw in a couple of nasturtium leaves. And as it's gently cooking and steaming and the juices are coming out of the tromboncino, the leaves are going to let out some of the pepperiness that nasturtiums have, that lovely peppery bite. We've got some lovely nasturtium capers that we picked last year, salted, pickled, that solution that these capers have been sitting in since last year, and just drizzle them over the top of the squash. Wrap the squash. What we're trying to do is create layers of flavour flowing through the dish. So you're going to have all those different flavours singing through the different levels of the dish. So we're just going to wrap the squash up, drop those, wrap like that, drop them in the oven for about 10 minutes at about 180. When you cook squash, it's really important to get that beautiful sweetness that you can get, whether it's a tromboncino or a butternut squash or anything like that. You really want to get that incredible sweetness to come out, and that takes quite a lot of cooking. It's not something you want to leave particularly undercooked. While we're waiting for that, we will just grab a few of our fresh nasturtium leaves. We've got some here on the estate. We've got different varieties. We've got some speckled leaves, some pure green leaves. I really don't like wasting anything, so I just leave the stalk on there. It's got such a beautiful flavour to it. There'd be no reason to get rid of it. And then we're just going to chop it through just one way. I don't like to smash herbs up so that you can't really tell what they are. So here we've got our little tomato dressing. As you can see, some of the tomatoes have really broken down, started to leach out their juices. The green ones have still stayed a little bit firm. Got the fermented chilli in there, starting to emulsify into a little vinaigrette dressing with the sweetness of the tomato, the acidity of the cider vinegar, and that chilli, salty hit. We're incredibly lucky to have a local buffalo farm down here and an incredibly talented cheesemaker here at the estate. And so we make our own fresh buffalo mozzarella. This was knotted last night and sent over to me this morning. Lovely, sweet, savoury cheese. And we're just going to break it down into little chunks. Again, none of that completely square or sliced pieces. I just want broken pieces. I want that natural looking shape. We're going to season that up with a little black pepper, a little sea salt, but not too much because it's been sitting in a brine, and then a little drizzle of olive oil. Twist that all together. We're going to grab a few nasturtium flowers, which are just going to finish our dish with a beautiful hit of pepperiness, but also an amazing colour and visual effect, and a few of our smaller nasturtium leaves as well. So just to finish our tomato dressing, big sprinkling of our nasturtium leaves, stirred in nice and gently. Take our squash from the oven, very carefully. We'll start to open it up. It's a little soft to touch, but it's still holding its shape, still a little bit firm. Take it off onto our board, remove this, and we're just going to slice it through. I love using whole vegetables. It's almost like cooking a piece of meat. It's a different way of thinking about food, but for us, the vegetable is king. The time and effort that is put in by the gardeners who source them, plant them, seed them, water them, care for them throughout the year, just enables us to use them in really interesting different ways. So we're just going to scatter our sliced squash on the plate, dress it with our pieces of buffalo mozzarella. The bite of the squash and the sweetness in there, then you've got the creamy richness of the mozzarella cheese, and then you've got the sweet peppery kick of the sauce and the nasturtium capers. The idea is when you eat a plate of food, I always think that you should be able to take a mouthful and taste every element. It's a harmony on a plate, just like you get a harmony in the gardens, in nature. I want that to sing through on the plate. So then over the top, very gently, spoonfuls of our tomato dressing. We're going to top with a few of our nasturtium capers. These are the flower buds once they've gone to seed. We salt them for about 24 hours and we wash them off, and then we put them into a vinegar solution, and they'll keep for as long as you want. And I really love the idea of using the fresh nasturtiums from this year with last year's preserved caper buds. Just going to scatter a few over the top. They'll give a real salty, acidic kick. And then to finish, the fresh nasturtiums just draped on top, and a couple of flowers. And that's it. Char grilled tromboncino squash, buffalo mozzarella, tomatoes and nasturtiums.